I'm John, owner of this YouTube channel, and it's been quite some time since I've made a video, probably about 3 years, not because of lack of desire, but just because I had not encountered any new information about codes of points I had not previously reviewed. So after someone on Twitter shared some information about the 1979 code with me, I'm very happy to be able to make this video and share it with you. I'm assuming that this code was in effect until 1983, perhaps 1984. I'm not really sure, so I am speculating about that. I do know that there was a 1985 code, and I do know that there was a 1989 code. So I'm not sure exactly at what point they transitioned from releasing them the year before the Olympics to the year after, but it clearly happened sometime in the early 80s. So, just some general information about this code of points, information that you might not know if you've only been following gymnastics for the past 13 years since 2006. In 1979 and up until 1997, there were still a compulsories competition that was called Competition 1, followed by the optionals. There was no team finals. The team competition was actually decided by some combination of the scores from the compulsories and the optionals. In the all around, 3 gymnasts per country were still competing with a total of 36 competitors. And it wasn't until 1989 that new life began, meaning that the winner of the all around and the event finals, involved averaging not just the scores from that day, but also from the competitions leading up. More specifically to this code of points, though, than the era as a whole, skills in this code ranged from A through B, C, and ending with something called C with additional risk, or what I'll refer to as CR. In the code of points, this is actually written as a C with an R as an exponent, but just for the ease of typing, I used a caret to indicate that the R is an exponent. So many years ago, I read Nellie Kim's autobiography translated into English, and I remember her mentioning something called Ultra C skills. And at the time, when I read it, 2002 probably, we had Super E skills that had just been introduced. But, reading this code of points now, I think she must be referring to the C skills with additional risk. Also, in this code of points, skills could be repeated once and still count as a value part as long as they existed in 2 different connections. That's also a rule that existed until 1997. Also, until 2002, gymnasts in the all around performed 2 vaults, which were averaged. And something you may not know if you've only been watching gymnastics since 2006, deductions range from 1/10 to 0.5 for something like a fall. All right, so when it came to the optional exercises, the base score was 9.5. 3 points comprised value parts, meaning some required combination of A, B, and C elements, and the number of C elements required progressed as the competitions became more difficult. So 1 C skill was required in the optionals and the all-around, and 3 were required in the event finals. 0.5 came from bonus in order to reach a 10.0 start value. More about that on the next slide. 2.5 for something called combination, which involved a variety of different requirements, diversity in elements and connections, tempo, rhythm in the exercise, stuff like that. And 4 points from execution and something called virtuosity. So, Probably the slide of greatest interest to any of you will be, where did the bonus points come from? Well, a maximum of zero point 0.2 came from originality, which does not mean probably what many people think that it meant in 1979. It did not mean, additional points just for doing something original. The meaning is actually much more specific. So, if you performed a difficult skill, so a C skill or more, that was also original, meaning you were the only gymnast in the world to perform it, you got 2/10 in bonus. And you earned that much until somebody else also performed the skill. And then at the next major competition, you lost that 0.2. But could still get 0.1 as long as no more than 10 gymnasts were performing the skill. So that means that there was another document outside of the code of points that listed these original skills and was updated from competition to competition. It's alluded to in the code of points, but I've never actually seen a copy of it. If you performed one of those especially risky C elements, it appears that you got 0.2 just for that. And then if you performed an additional C skill or risky C skill beyond what was required as part of the value parts, you got an additional 10th. So I guess you did not have to be original at all as long as you performed enough additional C skills or risky C skills. Virtuosity has sort of a lengthy definition in this code. To paraphrase it, it basically refers to amplitude, exactness of performance. But beyond that, it does not really say where this 0.2 comes from. It doesn't specify where it's something you lose or whether it's something that you gain. The definition of virtuosity changes as the 80s went on, and it becomes sort of a double deduction in like the 1985 code of points. You can watch that video if you're interested. Here's a list of the different vaulting families. There were 8 vaulting families, more than we have now. Some of the vaulting families are rather bizarre. So, a hecht over the vault, for example, a vault in which you sort of, engage in repulsion off the vault with your hands, scoot your feet under you, and then possibly do some sort of counter rotating salto, kind of like scoot your feet over the vault and then do like a gainer is maybe how I would describe it. There were also vaults that involved saltos in the pre-flight, like a front tuck off of the springboard onto the vaulting table. So that's kind of like a 1.5 rotating front tuck into something like a front handspring off. One thing that was interesting is that a front handspring front pike half was only a 9.9 start value. I say only because that vault was worth a 10.0 in 1992, and it was a 9.9 in 1996. I'm surprised it was so low here. Whereas in order to get a 10.0, you had to do a front tuck with a full twist. So you can pause and read through these if you're interested. But the vaults that I've listed here are 10.0 vaults unless I said otherwise. On the uneven bars, something that we're not accustomed to now is that if you performed 4 elements in a row, you were then required to do a bar change. The codes of points from at least 1979 up until 1992 did not involve connection bonus. They involved something called value raising. So for example, on the uneven bars, if you did 2 B skills in a row, the second B skill was upgraded to a C skill, and 2 C skills would result in the second C being upgraded to a C with additional risk, important for the purposes of getting bonus points. Here is a list of some, but not all, of the C skills with additional risk. On the balance beam, this event had special requirements. The uneven bars did not. The special requirements were not even worth the same. Of note is that a leap or jump was required with great amplitude, but not necessarily with a 180-degree split. So sometimes if you watch YouTube videos from this era, people will complain about the amplitude on the splits, but 180 degrees was not necessarily a requirement during much of this time period. Balance beam also used value raising in order to generate C and risky C skills. There was also a special criterion in order to get your 0.2 in risk if you did an acrobatic series of at least 3 elements that were at least Bs. And then at the bottom of the page is a list of some but not all of the C elements with additional risk. Something that's interesting me is the double front off the beam. The Arabian double front are listed in this code of points. Arabian double was, of course, not named the Patterson until 2004, I believe. The Crazy Kim dismount, that's obviously not a official name. That's what I call the element that Nellie Kim did that is sort of like an aerial cartwheel off the beam into an additional back tuck, still in the code of points now, worth an E. Floor exercise had 2 special requirements, 2 different tumbling passes. One of them had to either contain 2 saltos or a double salto. There were 4 ways to engage in value raising. These all refer to indirect combinations. That's why I put a hyphen and not a plus sign. But so, for example, if you did a 1.5 twist, walk out, round off, back handspring, double twist, the double twist would be upgraded to a C skill with additional risk. You could also get value raising by doing a mixed series or gymnastic series. So that refers to things like leaps and jumps. And I finished with a list of some of the C elements with additional risk. One that I've never actually seen before would be the jump with full twist into back salto, as opposed to a back salto with a full twist. So some concluding thoughts. Gymnasts were definitely, but not were encouraged but not required to be original, and they were required to take risks in order to have a full start value. Although, as much as we sort of romanticize risk, originality, and virtuosity, I'm not sure that this code really requires gymnasts to take any more risk than any later code did, because later codes required gymnasts to do D elements, and then codes after that required gymnasts to do D, E, super E, and beyond elements, also in combination in order to get a 10.0 start value. So maybe it's not so different. One thing that is certainly unique about this code, though, is that a gymnast start value was partially dependent, if they went the originality route, to what other gymnasts were performing. So you could have a 10.0 start value at the World Championships only to have a 9.9 start value at the next competition if one more gymnast performed the same super rare element that you had originated. I was also surprised that the base score was as high as as low as 9.5. 9.5 is the base score in the 1989 Code of Points. So I'm surprised that there wasn't more change in that 10-year period, at least in terms of the base score. Value raising certainly made sense in this Code of Points because there were only, essentially three levels of skills that were involved in the value raising formulas. Value raising becomes significantly more complicated see my video about the 1989 code. And so I'm not surprised that value raising was scrapped in favor of connection bonus in the 1993 code. So let me know if you have any questions or comments, and if so, leave them below. But thank you for watching. I hope this was interesting.